The next speaker, Honorable Sampanthan, you have 45 minutes.
Thank you, Mr. Presiding Chairman. We are discussing today, sir, the votes of the Ministry of Defence. The Minister of Defence being His Excellency the President, Mahinda Rajapaksa, and the Secretary to the Ministry being his brother, Mr. Gotabaya Rajapaksa, who rumour has had it will probably be a member of this House fairly soon. We would welcome that. May I, sir, in dealing with this, the votes and its ministry, have your indulgence to raise certain issues relating to this ministry that have an impact on the life of civilians in this country. I do not do this in a spirit of confrontation, but I do think that in this House in particular, we should have the freedom of expression and we should be able to articulate the feelings of the people we represent. Because after all, we claim to be a vibrant democracy, and it is therefore imperative that claim of ours is to be recognized and respected, and that such freedoms are freely exercised, not merely in this House, by all people who live in this country. I wish to first refer to the investigation which has been mandated by the Human Rights Commission, which has appointed a panel of investigators and a panel of experts. These persons have been appointed by the UN establishment. They have not been allowed to enter the country. They cannot carry out any investigations or record any evidence in Sri Lanka. If I might say so with respect, this is clearly not consistent with the conduct of a party that proclaims innocence. At the time of the military operations, and until shortly thereafter, the Sri Lankan government's position was that it was conducting a humanitarian operation with a policy of zero civilian casualty. This was the Sri Lankan position when the war came to an end. The true position, however, seems very different. No one can blame the Sri Lankan government for conducting a war against the LTTE. Different considerations apply in relation to civilians. The government estimated the civilian population in that area, the Bandi, where the war was raging, at around 70,000. Eventually, around 290,000 civilians came out from that area. The true figure is believed to be that there were in that area over 350,000 civilians. Government officials and civil society activists have testified to that effect. It was a war conducted without any independent witnesses. Members of non-governmental organizations and international non-governmental organizations were asked to leave that area in September 2008 without consideration of the consequent harm to the civilian population in that area, because it was these voluntary organizations that were till then largely responsible for supplying the population in that area with drinking water, food, medicine, and shelter, particularly in the context of the government's gross underestimation of the total population in that area. Food, ICRC and UN personnel were asked to leave that area. They were not able to fulfill their mandate in regard to humanitarian and protection issues. The media, both domestic and international, were kept out of that area. Members of Parliament were not permitted to go to that area. Persons who came out of that area, eventually about 200,000 persons came out, were detained in detention centers called welfare centers. We placed on record in Parliament all that happened at that time, as then when it happened. What we said in Parliament was not contradicted. Grave civilian issues, grave civilian casualties, race issues in regard to violations of international human rights and international humanitarian laws. The matter was eventually taken up by the UN Human Rights Council. 3 resolutions have been adopted by the UN Human Rights Council. Latest one in March 2014, which authorized an independent international investigation. This could have been averted if the Sri Lankan government had set up a credible, transparent domestic investigation after the adoption of the resolutions in 2012 and 2013. Now, the international investigators and the panel of experts appointed by the UN establishment are being denied entry into Sri Lanka. Citizens of this country who are possessed of the knowledge and information and who are able and willing to testify before the international investigators in regard to what happened to them and their compatriots are being denied their legitimate right to do so. This is the denial of their fundamental rights as citizens of this country It is also a blatant denial of their right to justice. Meanwhile, the Sri Lankan government, through persons in authority, have been publicly stating that anyone who testifies before or assists the investigation in any way would be violating Sri Lanka's constitution or its laws and would be prosecuted. This is clearly intended to intimidate witnesses and prevent them from making available information or giving evidence on matters within their knowledge and that are known to them. I wish to post a question whether such action would be in the long-term interest of this country, though it may be that it would serve the short-term interests of some individuals. No witnesses and victims protection law exists in this country. A bill was brought to Parliament sometime around 2007-2008, at the time when the Udalagama Commission was investigating certain grave violations of human rights. The bill was taken up for debate. Thereafter, the bill was abandoned. There have been commitments made to the international community that a victim and witnesses protection law will be passed in this country, but that commitment has not yet been kept. While on this matter, sir, I need to refer to a news item that appeared in the Island newspaper on Saturday, the 1st of November. I want to specifically deny the correctness of that report. The TNA has no official by the name referred to in that report, nor is the TNA engaged in collecting any such documents as is alleged in that report. While the TNA laments that citizens of this country are being denied the opportunity of appearing before and testifying before an investigative panel appointed by the UN, the TNA is certainly not engaged in any activity which would not be in conformity with the required standards of such investigative processes. In the joint communique issued by the President and the Secretary General of the United Nations on the conclusion of the visit of the Secretary General of the UN to Sri Lanka on 23rd May 2009, the Sri Lankan government committed itself to address the question of accountability. Accountability and reconciliation can be addressed meaningfully only through genuine, credible processes. They cannot be addressed through processes that are spurious, and such processes cannot achieve the desired results. The Sri Lankan government, in my submission, needs to rethink its whole approach to this question of accountability and reconciliation in the long-term interests of this country. Before I get on to my next point, sir, May I have your indulgence to refer to some observations made by one, the internal panel appointed to review the working of the UN during the crucial stages of the war in Sri Lanka. Certain observations made by the Secretary General of the UN himself, and also certain observations made by the International Independent Group of Eminent Persons who served in Sri Lanka at the time of the functioning of the Udalagama Commission that was tasked with the responsibility of investigating certain grave violations of human rights. This is what the report of the internal panel appointed to review the working of the UN during the final stages of the war stated, sir. In fact, there was some dissatisfaction with the way in which the UN establishment functioned during the final stages of the war, and this panel was appointed to go into that question. The panel stated, and I quote, between August 2008 and May 2009, as the war between the government of Sri Lanka and the Liberation Tigers of Tamil LTTE entered its final stages, an estimated 360,000 or more civilians were crowded into an even smaller part of the Vanni area, northern Sri Lanka, where many died as a result of sustained artillery shelling, illness and starvation. Almost 280,000 survivors were forcibly interned in military-run camps outside the area of conflict. A further observation they make, and I quote, is that the UN's failure to adequately counter the government's underestimation of population numbers in the Vanni, the failure to adequately confront the government on its obstructions to humanitarian assistance, the willingness of the UN in UN headquarters in Colombo to address government responsibility for attacks that were killing civilians, and the tone and content of UN communication with the government and member states on these issues contributed to the unfolding of dramatic events. The third observation I quote, sir, in regard to the report of this panel, was that they stated, and I quote, Sri Lanka's peaceful and stable progress will require a process of accountability and reconciliation and a political solution to the long-standing grievances of all communities, as well as a response to ongoing and new concerns and prevention and protection in the future. Working closely with the government of Sri Lanka, the UN needs to take on this further challenge. A panel of experts in their report emphasized the need to address accountability and reconciliation in a meaningful way, and also emphasized the fact that if accountability and reconciliation were to be addressed in a meaningful way, in a way in which the entire citizenry in this country could accept it, there had to be a political solution. That political solution would enthuse the question of accountability and reconciliation to be addressed in a moderate, reasonable, sensible way. I wish to quote, as I mentioned earlier, certain remarks made by the UN Secretary General in September 2013. In fact, when he made these remarks, His Excellency President Mahinda Rajapaksa himself was personally present. I quote, "In a rare admission of systemic failure of the UN, its chief has said the world body had failed during the final stages of Sri Lanka's ethnic war in 2009 that saw the military defeat of the LTTE. Ban made these remarks, Ban Ki-moon, the Secretary General, made these remarks while addressing the UN General Assembly's 68th session on Tuesday, where Sri Lankan President Mahinda Rajapaksa was also present. So the remarks were made in the presence of President Mahinda Rajapaksa. And I quote further, sir. The Secretary General further said, "As an intermediate step, I will organize a senior level team to give careful consideration to the report's recommendations and advise me on the way forward. Other action will follow in short order." So in other words, the Secretary General himself has accepted the fact that there were even certain failures by the UN establishment during certain crucial stages of the war, which needed to be addressed, and those issues are being investigated by the UN system through their internal processes. I also want to refer finally, sir, to certain observations made by the International Independent Group of Eminent Persons, IIGEP, when they were in Sri Lanka assisting the Uddalaka Commission. At the final press conference they held on 14th April 2008, before they withdrew from that mandate and left the country. At the final media briefing of the IIGEP on 14th April 2008, the results of intense military action taken by the Sri Lankan government against the LTTE, having a harmful impact on Tamil civilians, came up, and the IIGEP's response was that such a situation would amount to a clear violation of international human rights and humanitarian laws, and would inevitably have its own consequences. The International Independent Group of Eminent Persons, comprised of 11 persons from different countries the world over, chaired by retired Chief Justice of India, Justice P.N. Bhagavati. And this is the observation they made, sir. Finally, they said, I quote, "Summary executions, massacres, disappearances, wanton destruction of property, and forcible transfer of population can never be justified. No efforts should be spared to uncover responsibility, including recognition of command responsibility for such actions." The IIGEP has, however, found the absence of a will on the part of the government of Sri Lanka in the present inquiry to investigate cases with vigor where the conduct with its own forces have been called into question. That was in reference to the matters being investigated by the Uddalaka Commission and the role of the International Independent Group of Eminent Persons to assist and guide that commission. In the course of that final interview, it so happened that a journalist who was aware of the situation in the north and the east at that point of time raised this question of what the impact would be on international human rights and humanitarian laws if the Sri Lankan government, disregarding the rights of civilians, disregarding the safety of civilians, disregarding the entitlements of civilians, carried out a ruthless operation against the LTTE. And the answer given by them clearly, whether that would be unacceptable, that would be in violation of international humanitarian and international human rights laws. And exactly all that they quoted as being the possibility: massacre, summary executions, disappearances, displacement, destruction, all of it happened in the course of the war in its final stages. I now move on, sir,
yes,
to the...
point of order, Honourable Aswar.
Why doesn't the Honourable Sampanthan, being a leader of a party, speak about the massacres of the tigers?
No, that's not a point of order. Yes, Honourable Sampanthan, you can go on with your speech.
I would earnestly appeal to you not to disturb me.
No, you can't raise questions at this moment. It's his time. No.
I now get
That's
on to
not
my...
the point of order. Yes, Honourable Sampanthan.
I now get on to my second point, sir. That is the Northern Provincial Council and its governance. So governance can only be with the assent of the governed. Governance cannot take place without the assent of the governed. Verdict of the Northern Provincial Council election clearly indicates the democratic wish of the people of the North. I wish to place that verdict, sir, before you. The election held for the Northern Province in September 2013. The Ilangai Tamil Katchi received a total vote of 350,595, which was 78.48% of the total vote at that election. The United People's Freedom Alliance received a total vote of 82,838, which was 18.38%. 78% against 18%. That was the difference. And the Muslim Congress received 6,761 votes, 1.50%. The ITAK won 30 seats, the UPFA 7 seats, and the Sri Lankan Muslim Congress 1 seat. This vote, sir, is clearly indicative of the wish of the people of the Northern Province as to who should govern them at the provincial level. That verdict of the people must be respected. Sovereignty is vested in the people. In respect of matters that come within the competence of the provincial government, the democratic verdict of the people of the Northern Province must be respected. The Northern Provincial Council election was not held to cast into the dustbin the democratic verdict of the people of the Northern Province. If that be the attitude of the government, it must have consequences. Though the current provincial council arrangements are largely inadequate, even the present constitutional arrangements in the form of the 30th Amendment to the Constitution and the Provincial Councils Act came into being largely to the demand of the Tamil people for the sharing of political power in the Northeast and through the sacrifices made by the Tamil people. While in the northern province, the Chief Minister and the provincial government are being impeded at every turn in the performance of their legitimate duties. In the eastern province, through an unholy alliance, contrary to the wishes of the people, as demonstrated by their democratic verdict at the elections held in September 2012, we have a Chief Minister who will act only as directed by the central government. The irony of the situation is that the other 7 provinces, who never demanded power sharing, enjoy a measure of autonomy even beyond the 13th Amendment, while frustration pervades the political environment in the northeast. This, I respectfully submit, is a travesty of justice and cannot continue. The excessive presence of the armed forces, particularly in the north and also in the east, is a largely contributory factor to the erosion of the powers of provincial governance and the lack of an environment that can facilitate the fulfillment of the democratic wishes of the local people. The conclusion is inevitable that the central government and the armed forces do not want provincial governance in the northeast to be successful. This is a deliberate subversion of the democratic wish of the people, which has a seriously diverse impact on their future, politically, economically, socially, and culturally. It is the duty of the central government, I submit, to extend to the provincial government all the assistance required to make provincial governance a success under the present constitutional arrangements. The Sri Lankan government must also realize that it has committed itself to take further steps to make devolution more meaningful and more purposeful. It's also said in this regard that commitments made by the provincial government, commitments made to the provincial government and the Chief Minister of the Northern Province have not been honoured. Efforts to sabotage the effective functioning of provincial governance must inevitably have undesirable results. So this would be tantamount to stating that only Tamil politicians loyal to the government can successfully engage in provincial governance. Whatever may be the verdict, whatever may be the democratic wish of the people of the province, the position of the central government appears to be, regardless of the verdict of the people of the northern province, provincial governance can only be carried out by persons from the province who are loyal to the government and by the central government. Such an authoritarian attitude must inevitably lead to undesirable consequences in the whole country. It could only mean that democracy in Sri Lanka is no longer of any value. I would like to deal, sir, next with the question of land in both the northern and eastern province, which is the main problem that we have, particularly in areas like Valikamam in the north and Sampur in the east, where we have done our best to get the government to be able to look at these things objectively and come to fair decisions. But we have thus far not been successful in having those lands returned to our people, though we have done all that we could do to enable that. High security zones were declared in the northern province and in the eastern province, quite understandably, when the LTT possessed of long-range artillery, and there was the possibility of that artillery being able to reach security installations in the north and the east. In such a situation, the government cleared certain areas up to a point beyond the reach of the LTT artillery to ensure the security of those security installations. That is understandable. That is legitimate. But now the war is over. LTT is over. LTT artillery is not there. There is no need for high security zone. These are lands on which these people have lived for generations and centuries. They have lived on that land, they have farmed on that land, they have cultivated on that land, they have derived their livelihood on that land for generations and centuries. We went to the Supreme Court, both in Valikamam and in Sampur. You gave a commitment to the Supreme Court that those lands will be returned to the people. That in keeping with best practices, once the lands have been demined and all the explosives removed, the people will be resettled. It has not been done yet. I raised the matter in Parliament, particularly in regard to Sampur. Honorable Basil Rajapaksa stood up here and gave us the assurance that the people will be resettled. People can go back. It has not happened.
Honorable Member, you have 5 minutes left.
I'll finish up, sir.
Yes.
Thank you.
Now you take your 5 minutes.
Thank you, sir. Honorable His Excellency, the President went to Jaffna. I would have been a very happy man if he had gone to these camps and seen for himself the position, the situation in which these people are living. In Valikamam, several camps. Unfortunately, he did not go. I hope he'll go again. And when he goes there next time, he will see for himself. I want to make an appeal to the Defense Secretary. You are a very pragmatic person. Kindly give your mind to this question of the people going back to their lands. Not merely in Valikamam and Sampur. Wherever land has been taken over by the army, and in all districts in the north and the east, land has been taken over by the army, even after the war came to an end. Kindly return those lands to those people, because they need those lands. They need those lands to live, to reside, to carry on their livelihood in keeping with what they have done for several generations and centuries. I will deal lastly, sir, with 3 matters. I would like to lump them together because I'm short of time. One is in regard to the functioning of non-governmental organizations. One is in regard to special passes required by visitors from abroad, foreigners. They can be truly, fully foreigners, or they can be Sri Lankans who hold a foreign passport for the reason that they have lived in some foreign country for a long period of time. and the question of dual citizenship. I will deal with dual citizenship last, sir. Persons are entitled to apply to dual citizenship. A number of Sri Lankans living abroad have applied for dual citizenship because they want to be citizens of Sri Lanka. In whatever circumstances they went abroad, now that this facility is available, it had been suspended for some time, it has been reactivated, they want to come back and get citizenship in Sri Lanka, and if they do that, that's going to benefit Sri Lanka more than anyone else. But they're going to come here, they're going to invest, they're going to buy property, they're going to start businesses, they will do various things. Now, persons who require passes to go to the north, in regard to the foreigners, well, it's for you to decide. I should think that if they come on a visa to Sri Lanka, they should be able to go to any part of Sri Lanka. But in regard to persons who went abroad some years ago, who have now become citizens abroad, who now want to come because they have their relations, their parents, their next of kin living in the north, they have their temples in the north to which they are attached, they have properties in the north, they want to come, they want to invest here, they want to start business here. You should encourage them. That will be good for the country. That will be good for the people living in the north. That will be good for the country as a whole. So why should they be subjected to things like passes and inconvenience? NGOs, it's my respectful submission that the non-governmental organizations, which have always made very valuable contributions to the improvement of the quality of life of our people in several ways. I'm not saying that they must be allowed to do anything illegal. I'm not for a moment asking that they be permitted to adopt any modalities which are questionable or illegal. But if they function in a legal way, I think they must have the right to function without any restrictions, without any embarrassment, without any disturbance, and without any inconvenience. These are my humble requests. I would request the Ministry of Defence, particularly the Secretary Ministry of Defence, to give his mind to these matters and see to what extent these issues can be addressed in a reasonable way. Thank you, sir.
Thank you very much. මීළඟට ගරු තිස්ස කරලියද්ද අමාත්‍යතුමා ඔබතුමාට විනාඩි 10ක් තියෙනවා. ඊට පෙර මූලාසනය සඳහා ගරු පී රාජදුරේ මන්ත්‍රීතුමා යෝජනා කරන්න.
කතා කරන්න.
ගරු සභාපතිතුමනි සම්බන්ධන් ගරු මන්ත්‍රීතුමාගේ අදහස් ප්‍රකාශ කිරීමෙන් පසුව මටද අදහස් ප්‍රකාශ කිරීමට අවස්ථාවක් ලබා දීම ගැන ස්තුතිවන්ත වෙනවා. ලැබිලා තියෙන කාල වේලාව අනුව මේ වැදගත් අමාත්‍යාංශය ගැන අදහස් කෙටියෙන් ප්‍රකාශ කරන්න බලාපොරොත්තු වෙනවා. ඒ වගේම ප්‍රකාශ කරපු හැම දෙයකටම පිළිතුරු සපයන්නත් කාල වේලාවක් මදි. කෙසේ නමුත් මගේ කතාව අපි සිහිපත් කරන්නට ඕනේ මීට වසර කීපයකට උඩදී ආරක්ෂක අමාත්‍යාංශය සාකච්ඡාව හැම මාසකම හදිසි නීතිය දීර්ඝ කර ගැනීම සඳහා අපි මේ උත්තරීතර සභාවට ඒක රාශී වුණා. ඒ අවස්ථාවල ප්‍රකාශ වෙන්නේ අපේ අහිංසක ජනතාවට වෙච්ච හානිය, ගම්බිම් වලට ත්‍රස්තවාදී ප්‍රහාරයන් එල්ල වෙච්ච හැටි, හමුදාවේ ජීවිත විනාශ වෙච්ච හැටි, ඒ වගේම LTT සංවිධානයට ප්‍රහාර එල්ල කරපු හැටි, මේවා ගැන තමයි අපි දීර්ඝ කාලයක් මේ උත්තරීතර සභාවේ මේ රාජ්‍ය ආරක්ෂක අංශය ගැන කතා කරේ. යුද නිමාවත් සමග අපි සතුටු වෙනවා. යුද්ධය අහවර වෙච්ච ගමන්ම අපේ වීරෝදාර රණවිරුවන්ගේ කැපවීම තුළ, ජීවිත පරිත්‍යාගය තුළ ලබාගත්තා වූ මේ ජයග්‍රහණය නිසාවෙන් අද අපිට සංවර්ධනය ගැන කතා කරන්න පුළුවන් වෙලා තිබෙනවා. එනිසා ලෝකයේ ඉන්න ශ්‍රේෂ්ඨම විනයගරුකම අපේ හමුදාව, අපේ ත්‍රිවිධ හමුදාව ලෝකේ ඉන්න ඒ දක්ෂ හමුදාව අපිට මේ ජයග්‍රහණය ලබලා දුන්නා. ඉතින් ගරු සභාපතිතුමනි අපි කෙටි කාලයකින් ලබාගත් ඒ ජයග්‍රහණයක් නැති වෙන්නට යුද පෙරමුණේ පිහිටලා තිබ්බ ගම්මාන රාශියක් අපේ පළාත් වල තියෙනවා. මේ ගම්මානවල සංවර්ධන කටයුතු අඩාල වෙලා තිබුණා. මහා දැවැන්ත සංවර්ධන යෝජනා ක්‍රම ක්‍රියාත්මක කරන්නේ යනකොට ත්‍රස්තවාදී ප්‍රහාරයන්ට අපි ලක් වුණා. අද බොහෝ අයට මං හිතනවා ඇතැම් අයට මේ රටේ ත්‍රස්තවාදී යුද්ධයක් තිබුණද කියන එකත් සමහරුන්ට අමතක වෙලා තියෙන මේ අවස්ථාවේ මෙතන ඉන්න පුළුවන් අපේ හිටපු පොලිස්පතිතුමත් උදේවරුවේ රැඳී හිටියා. ඒ වගේම අපේ ආරක්ෂක ලේකම්තුමාලා මේ යුද තත්ත්වය පිහිටීම ඉතා මැනවින් අධ්‍යයනය කරපු අය. එනිසා යුද්ධයේ ජයග්‍රහණය සිංහල ජනතාවට පමණක් නෙවෙයි, දකුණේ ජනතාවට පමණක් නොවෙයි, නැගෙනහිර ජනතාවටත් මේ ආශිර්වාදය ලැබුණා. තමන්ට නිදහස ලබා දීම තුල ඔවුන්ට අනිත් අයට වගේ තමන්ගේ ගම්බිම් වලට ගිහිල්ලා පදිංචි වෙලා සාමාන්‍ය කටයුතු ආරම්භ කරන්න. එනිසා ඒ ගැන කතා කරනකොට යුද්ධය පැවතිච්චි තවත් රටවල් මේ ලෝකේ තියෙනවා. ඒ ලෝකේ තිබෙන ඒ රටවල් එක්ක සංසන්දනය කරලා බලනකොට ගරු සභාපතිතුමනි ශ්‍රී ලංකාව ඉතාමත් ඉදිරියෙන් ඉන්නවා. ඒ කියන්නේ ඒක පුද්ගල ආදායම පැත්තෙන් බැලුවත් සංවර්ධන ක්‍රියාදාමය පැත්තෙන් බැලුවත් ඒ රටවල් එක්ක සංසන්දනය කරනකොට ශ්‍රී ලංකාව ඉදිරියෙන් ඉන්නවයි කියලා අපිට කියන්නට පුළුවන්. එනිසා අද විවිධ මත තාම උතුරේ ජනතාව ගැන කතා කරනවා. උතුරට කිසිම දෙයක් වෙලා නැහැයි කියලා කියනවා. අපි සංවර්ධන ක්‍රියාදාමයට අත ගැහුවත් ඒ සංවර්ධනයක් ගැන වෙන අදහස් ප්‍රකාශ කරන්න. එනිසා ඒ දැවැන්ත සංවර්ධනයක් ගැන ඒ අද කතා කරන්න සතුටක් නැහැ. අපි බලාපොරොත්තු වෙන්නේ උතුරේ දකුණ වෙන් වෙලා තිබ්බ, යා වෙලා තිබ්බ ඒ යාවෙන්නට අවශ්‍ය ඒ ජනතාවට අවශ්‍ය ඒ වරම ලබා දීලා තියෙනවා. අද උතුරේ අයත් දකුණටත්, දකුණේ අයත් උතුරටත් ගමන් කරමින් ඉන්නේ. අපේ සැලසුම් සහගත යුද්ධයක් කරපු එයට නායකත්වය දුන්න අතිගරු ජනාධිපතිතුමා වගේම ආරක්ෂක ලේකම් ගෝඨාභය රාජපක්ෂ මැතිතුමාවත් අපි ආදරෙන් මේ අවස්ථාවේ සිහිපත් කරන්නට ඕනේ. ඒ වගේම තමයි උගත් පාඩම් මා ප්‍රතිසංවිධාන පිළිබඳ කොමිසමේ නිර්දේශ බොහෝමයක් අපේ අමාත්‍යංශ හරහා අද ක්‍රියාවට නංවනවා. ළමා සොල්දාදුවන් නැවත වතාවක් පුනරුත්ථාපනය කරලා ඒ දෙමව්පියන්ට බාර දීලා තියෙනවා. කවුද ළමා සොල්දාදුවන් බිහි කරුවේ? LTT සංවිධානය. අද කිසිම දෙයක් ඒ අය ගැන කතා කරන්නේ නැහැ. ජාත්‍යන්තර ස්වේච්ඡා සංවිධාන ගැන කතා කරනකොට අපිට විශාල සැකයක් තියෙනවා ඇතැම් ජාත්‍යන්තර ස්වේච්ඡා සංවිධාන ගැන. ඒ අය නිරන්තරයෙන්ම LTT සංවිධානයට සහයෝගය දක්වපු අය. ඒ නිසා ජාත්‍යන්තර සංවිධාන ගැන කටයුතු කරනකොට අපිට මීට වඩා කල්පනාවෙන් කටයුතු කරන්න වෙනවා. ඒ වගේම බොහෝ වැන්දපු කාන්තාවන් වෙනුවෙන් අපි මේ LLRC වාර්තාව අනුව කටයුතු කරමින් ඉන්නවා. ඒ ගැනත් අපි මතක් කරලා දෙන්නට ඕනේ. ඒ වගේම තමයි මේ යුද්ධ නිමාවත් සමග මිහිඳු සෙත් මැදුර ව්‍යාපෘතිය ආරම්භ කරා. ආබාධිත වෙච්ච රණවිරුවන්ට ඒ අය රැක බලා ගැනීම, ඔවුන්ට සැලකීම, ඔවුන් අගය කිරීම, ඒ හැම දෙයක්ම අද අපේ රජය විසින් කරගෙන යන මේක මොනතරම් උතුම් කාරණයක්ද කියන එකත් අපි පහදලා දෙන්නට ඕනේ. ඒ වගේම තමයි රණවිරු මාපිය උපහාර ක්‍රමයක් අද ආරම්භ කරලා තියෙනවා. ඒක වැඩි කරලා තියෙනවා 750 රුපියල් 1000 දක්වා. මම ඉල්ලීමක් කරන්නට ඕනේ ත්‍රිවිධ හමුදාවටත් යුද්ධයේදී පොලිසිය වගේම විශේෂ කාර්ය බලකාය වගේම ගම් ආරක්ෂා කරගන්න හිටපු එදා ග්‍රාම ආරක්ෂක නමින් හඳුන්වපු සිවිල් ආරක්ෂක බලකායටත් දෙමාපියන්ට ලබා දීම ගන්නා වූ තීරණය අපි ඉතා අගය කරන්නට ඕනේ. ඒ වගේම අපි වෙනුවෙන් අපි අරමුදල ඒ ජීවිතේ පූජා කරපු රණවිරුවන් වෙනුවෙන් අති කරලා තියෙනවා. ඒ සංකල්ප අතිගරු ජනාධිපතිතුමාගේ ආරක්ෂක ලේකම්තුමාගේ මූලිකත්වයෙන් ඒවා කරගෙන යනවා. ඒ වගේම ත්‍රිවිධ හමුදාර පරිසරය ගොඩනැගීමට ඔවුන්ගේ පවුල් තුන්වෙනි දරුවදී ලබා දෙන ඒ වසර 3කදී ලබා දෙන දීමනාව මම ඉල්ලීමක් කරනවා පුළුවන් නම් සිවිල් ආරක්ෂක බටයන්ටත් මේ අවස්ථාව ලබා දෙන්න කියන ඉල්ලීම කරනවා. ඔවුනුත් යම් කැපවීමක් කරා. ඒ වගේම යතුරු පැදි ලබා දීමත් පුළුවන් නම් රුපියල් 50000කට සහන මිලට සිවිල් ආරක්ෂක බටයින්ට ලබා දෙන්න කියන ඉල්ලීමත් මම මේ අවස්ථාවේ ප්‍රකාශ කරන්නට ඕනේ. ගරු සභාපතිතුමනි, නාගරික සංවර්ධන කටයුත්ත ගැන කතා කරනකොට සාමාන්‍යයෙන් රටක අගනුවර කියපුවාම ඉතාමත් පිළිවෙලකට තියෙන්නට ඕනේ. ලෝකයේ දියුණු බොහෝ රටවල් වල අගනුවර සහ අනිකුත් තදාසන්න නගරත් ඉතා මහජනතාවට ප්‍රයෝජනවත් ආකාරයට සැලසුම් කරලා තියෙනවා. අද අපි ඉතාමත් සතුටු වෙන නාගරික සංවර්ධන අධිකාරියේ ලේකම්තුමා ගෝඨාභය රාජපක්ෂ මැතිතුමා සහ සියලුම නිලධාරීන්ගේ මනා සැලැස්මක් පරිසරයත් ආරක්ෂා කරගෙන අපිට කියන්න පුළුවන් අද කොළඹ කියලා ඒ දවස්වල අපි සිංගප්පූරුවට ගිහිල්ලා ඉල්ල කියන අපි ලංකාව සිංගප්පූරුවක් කරනවා කියලා. හැම වෙලාවෙම උපමාවට ගත්තේ සිංගප්පූරුව. නමුත් අද අපේ රටේ ඒ හැම රටක්ම අභිබවා යන ආකාරයට අපේ රටේ නාගරික සංවර්ධනයක් ඇති කරලා තියෙනවා. බොහෝ ස්ථානවලට මහින්ද චින්තන ප්‍රතිපත්තියේ ප්‍රකාශය යටතේ රාජ්‍ය ආරක්ෂක නාගරික සංවර්ධන අමාත්‍යාංශය මඟ පෙන්වීම යටතේ අද මේ වැඩපිළිවෙළ ක්‍රියාත්මක කරනවා. කොළඹ අඩුපාඩුකම් ජනාවාස ඒ ජනතාවට පහසුකම් සලසලා ඉවර වෙලා ඒ හා සමාන රජයේ සේවකයන්ටද නිවාස ව්‍යාපෘති ආරම්භ කරලා තියෙනවා. ඒ වගේම මම සතුටු වෙන්නේ මේ නිවාස යෝජනා ක්‍රමේදී විශේෂයෙන්ම කාන්තාවන් හා දරුවන්ට ආත්මගරුත්වයක් ඇතුව ජීවත් වීමේ වරමක් අවස්ථාවක් උදා කරලා දුන්නා. ඒ ගැන අපි ස්තුතිවන්ත වෙන්නට ඕනේ. අද ඔවුන්ට කියලා පැහැබර නිවහනක් තියෙනවා. ඔවුන්ගේ ආත්මගරුත්වය ඇතුව ජීවත් වීම. ඒ වගේම තමයි ලැබිලා තියෙන කාල වේලාව අනුව කොළඹ නගර අලංකාරයේ සහ ගම් අතුර තත්ත්වය යටතේ නගර නිරන්තරයෙන් යට වෙනවා ගම් අතුරට. ඒ නිසා ප්‍රධාන මම්මාවත් දෙපස ඇලවේලි ඉදි කරලා පදික වේදිකා ඉදි කරලා ඒ හැම දෙයක්ම යටිතල පහසුකම් ලබා දෙන තා විනාඩියක් දෙන්න ගරු සභාපතිතුමනි. ඒ වගේම පුරාවිද්‍යාත්මක වටිනාකමක් ඇති පෞරාණික ගොඩනැගිලි සංරක්ෂණය කරන නොගැලපෙන භාවිතයන් නගරයෙන් ඉවත් කිරීමට කටයුතු කරලා තියෙනවා. නාගරික සංවර්ධන අධිකාරිය සතු ඉඩම් වල විශාල ප්‍රමාණයක් විදේශ ආයෝජනයන් බහු ගොඩනැගිලි ඉදි කිරීමට අවස්ථාවක් ලබා දීලා තියෙනවා. ඒ වගේම ප්‍රධාන නගරමින් කුඩා නගර සංවර්ධනය කිරීමටත් අද මේ දකුණේ ඉඳන් උතුරට යනකොට හම්බ වෙන අවසානම නගරයේ මැදවච්චි ආසනයත් අද නාගරික සංවර්ධනය කිරීමට ඔබතුමා ලබා දුන්න ආශිර්වාදය ගැන මගේ ගෞරවනීය ස්තුතිය පුද කරමින් මට අවස්ථාවක් ලබා දීම පිළිබඳ ගරු සභාපතිතුමාට මගේ ස්තුතිය පුද කරනවා.
බොහොම ස්තුතියි මැතිතුමා, බොහොම ස්තුතියි. ඊළඟට ගරු සරත් වීරසේකර ඔතන විනාඩි 10ක කාලයක් තියෙනවා.
ගරු මුල්සොනම භවන මන්ත්‍රීතුමනි, රාජ්‍ය ආරක්ෂක සහ නාගරික සංවර්ධන අමාත්‍යාංශය වෙනුවෙන් හමුදාවේ අවුරුදු 39ක් පමණ සිටපු නිලධාරියෙක් හැටියට මේ අවස්ථාවේදී යමක් පවසන්නට අවසර දීම ගැන ස්තුතියි. නමුත් කාලය ඉතාම කෙටි. අපි නාගරික සංවර්ධනය ගැන කතා කරනකොට අපිට පේනවා මිට ඉස්සෙල්ලා කතා කරපු ගරු අමාත්‍යවරයා කිව්වා වගේ නගරය අලංකාර වෙලා, ජල උද්‍යානය හැදිලා, ඒ වගේම තමයි මන්තිවරු හැදිලා, දේශීය සහ විදේශීය සංචාරකයන්ට ආකර්ශනීය ස්ථානයක් බවට පත් වෙලා තියෙනවා. ඒ වගේම තමයි අපිට පේනවා පිරිමි කාන්තාව සහ දරුවන් ඒ මන්තිවරු වල උදේ හවස ව්‍යායාම වල යෙදෙනවා, ඇවිදිනවා. ඒකින්ද නාගරික සංවර්ධන අධිකාරිය නගරයේ අලංකාරය කරනවා පමණක් නෙවෙයි, නගරබද ජනතාවගේ සෞඛ්‍යයටත් හිතකර පරිසරයක් හදනවා කියන එකත් අපිට මේ අවස්ථාවේදී පෙනී යනවා. 2020 දී කොළඹ පුරය පැල්පත් වලින් තොර පුරයක් බවට පත් කරන්න තියෙන ඉලක්කයට ඊටාම හොඳින් ගමන් කරන බව අපිට පේනවා. ඒකට අපි නාගරික සංවර්ධන අධිකාරියට, ඒ අමාත්‍යාංශයට අපි අපේ කෘතවේදීත්වය මේ අවස්ථාවේදී පිරිනමනවා. ආරක්ෂක අමාත්‍යාංශය ගැන කියනකොට විපක්ෂයේ නගන ලොකුම චෝදනාව තමයි මේ පවුලේ අයට විශාල කුට්ටියක් ලබා දුන්නා කියලා තමයි විපක්ෂය කියන්නේ. ඒ මොකද රාජ්‍ය ආරක්ෂක අමාත්‍යවරයා, අතිගරු ජනාධිපතිතුමා, ඒ වගේම ලේකම්තුමා, එතුමාගේ සහෝදරයා ගෝඨාභය රාජපක්ෂ මැතිතුමා නිසා. ඔව්, නමුත් ඒ කුට්ටියෙන් ගරු සභාපතිතුමනි 80%කටත් වඩා යන්නේ ත්‍රිවිධ හමුදා සහ සිවිල් ආරක්ෂක බලකායේ සෙබළුන්ට සහ ඒ සිවිල් වැසියන්ට පඩිනඩි ගෙවීම සඳහා. ඒ වගේම තමයි රාජ්‍ය ආරක්ෂක අමාත්‍යාංශයේ යටතේ තියෙනවා ආයතන 25ක්. නාවික හමුදාව, යුද හමුදාව, ගුවන් හමුදාව, සිවිල් ආරක්ෂක බලකාය, වෙරළ ආරක්ෂක දෙපාර්තමේන්තුව, වෙරළ සංරක්ෂණ දෙපාර්තමේන්තුව, පුද්ගලයන් ලියාපදිංචි කිරීමේ දෙපාර්තමේන්තුව, ආගමන විගණන දෙපාර්තමේන්තුව මේ අනාදි වශයෙන් ආයතන 25ක් තියෙනවා. ඒ ආයතන 25ම ජාතික ආරක්ෂාවට ඍජුව සහ වක්‍රව දායක වෙන දේවල්. ඉතින් දායක වෙන ආයතන. ඒ ආයතන වල තමයි මේ වගේ විශාල කුට්ටියක් යන්නේ. එහෙම නැත්නම් පවුලේ අයට නිවාස සදන්ටවත් ඒ නිවාස වටා තාප්ප ගහන්නවත් නෙමෙයි මේ වගේ ජාතික ආරක්ෂාවට තමයි ජනතාවගේ ආරක්ෂාවට තමයි මෙතරම් විශාල මුදලක් කැප කරලා තියෙන්නේ. අද සිවිල් ආරක්ෂක බලකායේ සියලුම සමාජිකයන්ගේ ගෞරවයට අතිගරු ජනාධිපතිතුමා ගරු ආරක්ෂක ලේකම්තුමා පත් වෙලා තියෙනවා. මොකද යුද්ධය නිමුණාට පස්සේ තරජිත ගම්මාන නැති වුණාට පස්සේ විපක්ෂයේ නගපු චෝදනාවක් තමයි මොකටද සිවිල් ආරක්ෂක බලකායේ තියාගෙන ඉන්නේ විසිරවන්න යන්න ඕනි කියලා. ඊට පස්සේ ව්‍යාපෘති සංකල්පය ගෙනල්ලා සිවිල් ආරක්ෂක බලකායේ පැවැත්ම සාධාරණය කළේ ගරු ආරක්ෂක ලේකම්තුමා ගරු ජනාධිපතිතුමා එතුමන්ලාට ඔවුන්ගේ ප්‍රණාමය හිමි වෙලා තින්නේ ඒකයි. අද වෙනකොට සිවිල් ආරක්ෂක බලකාය රටේ නිෂ්පාදනයට ඍජුව දායක වෙනවා. පුරාවස්තු ආරක්ෂා කරනවා, ආගමික ස්ථාන ආරක්ෂා කරනවා, ආර්ථික මර්මස්ථාන ආරක්ෂා කරලා රටේ සංවර්ධනයට ඉතාම ඍජුව දායක වෙනවා. ඇමරිකන් ජනාධිපති ජෙෆර්සන් වරක් කිව්වා the price for liberty is eternal vigilance කියලා. ඒ කියන්නේ අපිට සාමය අවශ්‍ය නම්, නිදහස අවශ්‍ය නම් ඒකට අපි නිතරම විමසෙල්ලෙන් ඉන්න ඕනි කියලා. ඒකට අපි ඊටාම හොඳට වෘත්තීය මට්ටමින් අපේ හමුදාවල් නඩත්තු කළ යුතු. ඒකට තමයි රාජ්‍ය ආරක්ෂක අමාත්‍යාංශයේ මේ තරම් ලොකු වැය ශීර්ෂයක් ඇති වෙන්නේ. අපිට ශක්තිමත් නාවික හමුදාවක් තියෙනවා. මට නාවික හමුදාව ගැන පැයක් පමණ කතා කරන්න පුළුවන්. මම නාවික හමුදාවේ අවුරුදු 35ක් හිටිය නිසා ඊටාම ආඩම්බරයි. අපේ නාවික හමුදාව තමයි මුළු ලෝකෙම මේ වගේ දරුණු මරාගෙන මැරෙන බෝට්ටු සමග සටන් කරපු එකම නාවික හමුදාව තමයි අපේ ශ්‍රී ලංකා නාවික හමුදාව. ඒක නිසාම තමයි අද බ්‍රිතාන්‍යයේ සහ ඇමරිකාවේ නාවික නිලධාරීන් ඇවිල්ලා අපේ උපක්‍රම ස්ට්‍රැටජිස් ඇන්ඩ් ටැක්ටික්ස් අපෙන් ඉගෙන ගන්න තත්වයකට ඇවිල්ලා තියෙන බව ඉතාම ආඩම්බරෙන් මා කියනවා. ඒ වගේම ශක්තිමත් යුද හමුදාවක් අපිට තියෙනවා. ලෝකයේ තියෙන දරුණුම ත්‍රස්තවාදී කණ්ඩායම හමුදාව ගොඩබිමෙන් පරාජයට පත් කළා. අද නේටෝ හමුදාවට තාම තලේබාන්වරු තලා ගන්න බැරි වෙලා සිටිනවා. නමුත් අද LTT සංවිධානය තලා ගත්තා අපේ ඊටාම නිර්භීත යුද හමුදාව. ඒකෙන් තමයි අපිට ඊටාම හොඳ ගුවන් හමුදාවක් තියෙනවා. our pilots are very capable of pinpoint bombing කියලා තමයි මම හිතන්නේ අපේ විදේශීය ආපු යුද්ධ විශේෂඥයෝත් මම හිතන්නේ ඊටාම විස්මයටපත් වුණා. එදා තමිල් චෙල්වන්ගේ නිවස අනික් නිවසත් අතර තියෙද්දී එතුමා ඒ තමිල් චෙල්වන්ගේ හිසටම දාලා චප් වෙන්න බෝම්බ දාපු අපේ ගුවන් හමුදාවේ ඒ වගේ පයිලට්ස්ලා ඊටාම දක්ෂ පයිලට්ලා අපිට ඉඳලා තියෙනවා. ඒ වගේම දක්ෂ ගුවන් හමුදාවක්, දක්ෂ යුද හමුදාවක්, දක්ෂ නාවික හමුදාවක් තියෙන නිසා මම හිතන අපිට නැවත වරක් ත්‍රස්තවාදයට හිත ඔසවන්න දෙන්නේ නැතුව අපිට ඉන්න පුළුවන්. ඒ වගේම තමයි අපි යුද්ධය ඉවර කරලා තියෙනවා සභාපතිතුමනි. නමුත් යුද්ධය ඉවර කළාට ත්‍රස්තවාදය සම්පූර්ණයෙන් ඉවර වෙලා නැහැ. ත්‍රස්තවාදී නැමැති කොටියාගේ වලිගය තමයි අපි විනාශ කරලා තියෙන්නේ. ඒ කොටියාගේ හිස තාම තියෙන්නේ ප්‍රංශයේ කැනඩාවේ, අත් දෙක තාම තියෙන්නේ ප්‍රංශයේ සහ ජර්මනියේ පස්සගාතෙන් එකක් තියෙනවා දකුණු ඉන්දියාවේ, අනිත් එක තියෙනවා නෝර්වේ වල. ඒක නිසා ජාත්‍යන්තර වශයෙන් ත්‍රස්තවාදී කොටියා ජීවත් වෙලා ඉන්න තාක්කල් මම හිතන අපේ හමුදාව අපි අනිවාර්යයෙන්ම උත්තරේ තිබිය යුතුමයි. මේ ඇමරිකාවේ ස්ටේට් ඩිපාර්ට්මන්ට් එකේ they have released the latest their statement. They say LTT uses its international contacts and the large Tamil diaspora in North America, Europe and Asia to procure weapons, communications, funding and other needed supplies. LTT's international network of sympathizers and financial support persists, and LTT members and supporters still operate in Sri Lanka and South India. This is the latest State Department's statement. And TNA එක කියනවා උතුරෙන් හමුදාව ඉවත් කළ යුතුයි කියලා. I must say in this house, TNA has brought misery to the Tamil people, not the joy to the Tamil people. And you know, yes, that is my view. And you know, Prabhakaran is a ruthless killer. He has killed pregnant women, cut open the tummy, took the fetus and chopped like cutting the fish. And one of the TNA MPs telling that such a Prabhakaran is a hero. And so that is a TNA attitude. And also, I know one of the other members about few days ago in this house, he said to this effect that if the things the way the things are going, the Tamil people do not have any other option other than going for a Elam. And in my opinion, Mr. Chairman, TNA shouldn't have been here in this parliament enjoying all the facilities and privileges like they are doing today. In my opinion, TNA should have been banned the moment that they crushed the LTT, because in the other countries, the corresponding political parties have vanished. When Hitler was defeated, his Nazi political party was destroyed. When Pol Pot was killed, his political party, the Cameroon political party, was vanished. When Saddam Hussein was killed, his Baath political party was destroyed. And when Mubarak was taken out of power, his political party was banned. But after we comprehensively defeated the LTT, we allowed you to stay because of the compassion of our president. And you are taking advantage of that. And then doing treacherous activities abroad and letting down our motherland. Don't take my time.
Honorable
Please sit down. I have only 10 minutes. Please sit down. Don't take my time.
He is telling that we should be banned.
What is the point of order that you are raising?
No, and we want to tell you that we have nothing to do with the
No, that is not a point of order. Don't take my time.
Speaker, you continue.
You see, and Honorable Sampanthan says, army occupying large number of land in Jaffna. And also, about TNA and your Chief Minister Vigneswaram says Sinhalization and militarization. And I must ask, what happened to the 24,000 Sinhalese who were living in 1981 in Jaffna? With the natural growth, you must understand, by now there would have been 100,000 Sinhalese families in Jaffna. What about 15,000 Muslims who were living in Jaffna? You are not talking about them. You are talking about the land that's been taken over by the army. So that is your attitude, and that is ethnic cleansing. And you definitely supported that ethnic cleansing of the LTTE. That is why there is no Sinhalese. That is why there is no Muslim in Jaffna Peninsula. And I propose to the House that definitely we must settle down all the Muslims and all the Sinhalese that were taken out and chased away from Jaffna Peninsula years back. And also the Chief Minister, how many minutes?
You already nearing.
Now give me 2 more minutes. And your Chief Minister Vigneswaram said it is Sinhalization. I must say his both sons are married to Sinhalese women. And he lived here, he was born here, he lived here, he worked here in Colombo among the Sinhalese, right? And he virtually lived all his life in Colombo. And also you must understand, he attended the most popular boys' schools in Colombo among the Sinhalese. And he became a Supreme Court judge. But he is the least qualified person to talk against the Sinhalese desiring to live in the Jaffna Peninsula. And also you must understand, he is talking about the militarization. What did he do? What did he speak for the last 30 years about the de facto rule in LTT in Jaffna Peninsula? He never condemned LTTization. Did he ever talk on behalf of the low-caste Tamils against the LTT, taking their children and using as cannon fodder? Using as child soldiers. What did you do? And he also, all of a sudden, after keeping mum for 30 years, all of a sudden, he got up and then talk about the Sinhalese militarization. Give me just 30 seconds. And also I must tell Suresh Premachandran, Honorable MP Suresh Premachandran said his dream about the Elam. I must tell that his Elam dream will never come true. It will never happen as long as we live. It never happen as long as he lives until his death. Even in the hell, he will not see the Elam happening, because that is the place that they are going after death. And to meet their Prabhakaran and their comrades, all the all his comrades in the hell. And when the Yamarajuru starts skinning you alive for the atrocities that you have committed for mankind, just remember me, and I will put a bucket of salt water from heaven for you to put on your
Please
put in a body.
Thank you, thank you.